Wait, where? What? I'm in a box!
Oh no. No, not the box.
This is the Escape the Zoo podcast. With your host, Daniel Clark.
Well, Yaron, thank you so much for being here. I'm a huge fan of your work and really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I figured we'd jump in with an interesting photo that I saw of you with some cheetahs actually on your car, I believe, or one cheetah kind of on the front of your windshield. Can you talk a little bit about what was going on there?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's something that happened to me twice. I know about drivers or safari guides that have been guides for like 30 years, and it never happened to them, and to me, it happened twice. Once it happened in 2011. That was the first time I was with my girlfriend and my son. And out of the blue, one of the cheetahs just jumped on our car. It was relatively scary because we've never heard of this before. And right. And the cheetah was a little nervous, so she kept hissing. And my son was a little nervous, so he started crying. And my girlfriend was hugging him and protecting him, while I was just like videotaping the whole thing. So it lasted for about 15, 20 minutes. And it was like, it was a little scary because the cheetah kept like looking down at my son that was crying because it's an open roof. And the cheetah is just like half of its body was like inside the car. So she was just like looking down at my son and my girlfriend and keep hissing. And then after 20 minutes, she just got down and my son was relieved and everyone were smiling. So that was the first time. The second time happened 3 years later when two cheetahs actually jumped on my car. Again, it's an open roof, and I saw that happening. And at that point, I was actually kind of expecting it. I saw the two cheetahs heading towards my car, and they went actually to another car first, and the people were like scared, so they closed the roof and they drove away. And I told my driver, back up a little bit, and then the cheetahs, one jumped in the front, one jumped in the back. And these cheetahs stayed with us for like 2 hours. One of them sat on the back of the car, just like slept there. And then later on, he actually climbed on the roof of the car. And I was trying to take some videos of it with my GoPro. So I was actually aiming the GoPro to the roof without seeing what it's doing. And the cheetah was starting to bite and play with the GoPro, just like cats do.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
is that footage online? I haven't seen that.
Yeah. It's on YouTube. This one actually got more than 20,000 hits. But
oh, wow.
Now the thing about that is that was back in the days, and it was a relatively new thing. Nowadays, they don't allow cheetahs to do that because more and more cheetahs they teach their cubs to do it. So at least in Kenya, in Tanzania, it's still allowed, but in Kenya, when you see a cheetah approaching your car, you're supposed to drive away and not let him jump. The reason for that is that there've been some incidents when people actually hurt the cheetah. One guy was posing with like a baseball cap on top of the cheetah, and and some people got scared and they started driving off with the cheetah on their roof, and the cheetah fell and could have broken its leg. And that's like
people suck.
Yeah. Oh yeah, big time. Tell me about it.
Everything that happens that's pretty cool, that we'll find some way to like ruin it.
Yeah.
Not to be negative.
That's true.
But so was it something that the first time you were scared about?
Yeah. So
I would be worried, but it sounds like your girlfriend and your son were terrified and you were just enjoying the whole thing.
No, actually the funny thing was like, I was a little shaky. My girlfriend was the only one that was like pretty cool. And she was like, she kept laughing and looking towards the camera, smiling as she's like protecting my son. And he was the one that was like crying. And I was nervous just because, my son is there and I never heard of something like that. And it is a wild cat, so you don't know what the reaction is going to be. The second time I was totally cool and I was happy, and I was standing face to face, like 2 feet from the cheetah, like taking close-up shots of like the ticks on its eyes. So the bottom line is that it was scary the first time and fine on the second time.
I feel like cheetahs, at least your like worst case scenario, if it did go after your son, you're like, I could see maybe just pushing a cheetah off the car and like not hurting it, but getting it away. Like if that was a
Right.
lion, I think I'd be a little more worried.
That's actually the true, because the drivers, like, since it's been happening more and more, the drivers tell people that, you know, when it's a cheetah, they usually don't do anything. They're relatively calm and they just look for a vantage point.
Mhm.
If it was lion or leopard, everyone would like drive away or close the roof, and because that's not a fun business. But again, it is a wild cat, and you don't know how they're going to react. And it is their house. This is their, you know, this is where they live. So we have to respect them. And
For sure.
yeah,
And so that's why they were teaching their young to do it. It's a vantage point types of thing.
yeah. So actually, it's, you know, sometimes it's like flat land all over, and not even a tiny little termite mound for them to stand and look to the horizon. So they just climb on the cars because that's what's there. The funny story was, it wasn't so funny, but the cheetahs that climb on my car in Tanzania, one of them spotted, before we even heard anything, he spotted the baby wildebeest heading towards our car. And he saw it making its way towards us because it was a baby wildebeest that lost his mother. So it was kind of lost. And the cheetah spotted it, and just because he was sitting high and he could see it, and he ended up killing it right in front of us.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it was hard to watch because you could see it happening, and the baby's just like running and all happy. I mean, he's lost his mom, but still like looks relatively happy. And when he realizes that the cheetah is there, it was a little too late.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you see a cheetah take down a wildebeest, you're like, circle of life. But when it's a baby wildebeest, you're always just like, ugh, it's hard to watch. Even though you know it's also part of the circle, but
right. I mean,
a little different.
I've seen like multiple kills, but there are a few things that are difficult. One is a baby animal, and the second thing that, thank God, I didn't get to see, even though I kind of want to see, is like a lion or something of that sort takes an elephant or a giraffe. That's another thing that's going to be very difficult for me to watch. For some reason, these animals are more, you know, they're more majestic. So it's going to be really heartbreaking to watch something like that.
I've seen some of the videos of a lion pride attacking a giraffe, and you'd be shocked at the ability the giraffe actually has to defend itself.
Right.
Though.
They're like kicking and
whipping their neck back and forth.
Yeah. But
something I found on your feed that I had no idea about that I thought was fascinating is that giraffes only sleep for like 5 minutes at a time, 30 minutes a day or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, they don't need to sleep much. And, you know, with giraffes, when they're really vulnerable because of how tall they are and how a little awkward it is for them to get up. So whenever they lie down on the ground or whenever they kneel down to drink, that's when usually the lions take them. So one of the things that nature did to protect them is that they don't really need to sleep much, and they just stay up and stand more than 23 hours a day. And
that's the dream.
Yeah.
I wish I didn't have to sleep.
Yeah, can you imagine how much you can accomplish in like 23 hours?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Or just like, you got to figure that not only could you accomplish so much, but you would never have that feeling of fatigue, apparently. So even like for me, like half the day, like I get like 8 hours of work done, and then the rest of the day I'm struggling through my sleepiness to get work done. They probably are never tired.
Yeah, that's why they invented coffee.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought your journey as a wildlife photographer was interesting, coming from a veterinary background and coming from Israel. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what got you into this? Were you, obviously it seems like you were an animal lover from the beginning, but your journey would be, I'd love to dig into that a little bit.
Sure. I was born and raised in Israel, and I went to vet school in Israel. That's always been my dream. I always wanted to be a vet ever since I was a kid. I always loved animals. Always wanted to be around animals. So it was like a natural thing for me to become a vet. And then later on, I started traveling to places where there are animals, because again, that's the thing that usually attracted me. And Africa was the number one thing that I always wanted to visit, one of the places that I always wanted to visit. And back in 2011, the trip that I told you about, the cheetahs, that's when I really fell in love with Africa. That was my second time in Africa, but that was the first time that I fell in love with Africa. I visited a place and I saw so many special things that just hooked me to the place, and I was like, okay, this is where I want to be for the rest of my life if possible. But when I came back from the trip, I saw that I had like extremely special moments, but the picture qualities were not so great. So that was kind of upsetting. So I decided to get a little more serious about photography. I got myself a better camera. I learned online, and with help of friends, I took some courses and started getting more serious about photography, and then started shooting more and more. And one thing led to another. So I started like visiting Africa more and more to practice what I learned. And I felt that my veterinary background as a vet gives me a little bit of advantage over some people, because I can somewhat read animals' behavior and predict certain moments. So as a wildlife photographer, most of the time you just have to sit and wait and for the special moment to appear. And it can be very, very tiring and boring. And sometimes you can miss the shot because you didn't pay attention. And I noticed that I actually have this ability to tell what's going to happen. And sometimes you can see that nothing's going to happen for the next like hour. So you can, relax a little more. And when I see that certain things happen, then I get more alert and prepare for certain shots. So that's the veterinary background that gives me the advantage in that sense.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like most people have a passion for photography, then they fall in love with wildlife and are like, okay, let's marry these together. You almost had the opposite, where you're like, I love animals, I love being in the natural world, but damn, my photos suck. I need to figure this out. And decided to learn the trade after that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what brought you to New York?
So New York, I came to New York to work as a vet. I moved with my family there originally. I found a job, and then I ended up moving back to Israel after we finished what we had to do in New York. But then I felt like that my work as a veterinarian was more rewarding in New York than in Israel, and I was able to do the combination of traveling and photography and working as a vet better when practicing in New York than in Israel.
What are most of the animals that you're working on in New York? Like dogs, cats?
Yeah,
anything else that's a little odd?
No, unfortunately not. It's in New York City. It's mostly like dogs and cats. They do have, some people have more what we call exotic animals, but then they usually go to see veterinarians that specialize in exotic animals. So it's like birds and snakes and iguanas. But the majority of people have cats and like small little chihuahuas. And so yeah, no elephants and giraffes there.
And how about in Israel? Is there, I mean, outside of the veterinary world, but actually pure wildlife in Israel? What's that like?
It's not as wild as Africa. It's, I would say, as wild as New York can be. So we used to have a lot of animals, but unfortunately, just like anywhere else in the world, some of the wildlife is just disappearing. So I remember 20 something years ago, we had leopards in Israel, and now the last ones were hit by cars, and so they're all gone. So we have some gazelle and some animals that look like gazelle, like mountain goats, and we have a lot of birds. Israel is like one of the best places for birding. I'm not a
really?
Yeah, I'm not a birder, but Israel is on a major route of migration between Africa and Europe. So all the birds that do that migration, when they travel in the spring to Europe, and then during the fall they travel to Africa, and they always have to pass through Israel, because otherwise they have to fly over the ocean, over the Mediterranean. So birders from all over the world come to see like many special species, and it's a very, very exciting for birders. So birders definitely have a great time in Israel. Other wildlife, not so much.
Oh, that's cool. I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
How frequently do you go to Africa?
So I try to go as frequent as my veterinary work let me, but roughly about 4 times a year. I try to, recently in the past few years, we started bringing people on safari.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so now we're actually have a small safari company that specializes in small groups, and we bring people to Africa. We want people to experience this beautiful place. We just enjoy, literally, we enjoy bringing people to Africa so they can see this beauty and help preserve this majestic place. And so we try to do it as often as we can, roughly about 4 times a year.
Where do you focus on traveling to mostly? Is it
Wait,
specifically in Kenya or Tanzania, or do you bounce around a little bit?
yeah, mostly Kenya and Tanzania. The reason is that we found that they're the richest countries wildlife wise. You're going to get to see the most animals in relatively small amount of traveling, and you get to see all the big animals that people usually look to see on a safari. And so it's mostly Eastern Africa. We do take people also on gorillas trekking in Uganda and Rwanda. We go Botswana, Namibia, but the majority of the time, that's where most people, when they go for the first time, that's the places that we always recommend. Many people want to see the migration, the big migration of wildebeest. So that's like an amazing thing to watch, and it's only in Kenya and Tanzania. So, and you can also see the big five in Africa, in Kenya and Tanzania, much easier than compared to other places, and they're more in their natural habitat. They're not like in reserves that are like fenced, or everything is wide open and as wild as can be. So
that's cool. Does it, and it feels like a pretty wild. It's always hard to, if you haven't been to Africa, totally get an understanding as to what the surroundings are when you go to a place like that, whether it's something where there's dirt roads everywhere, that there's a bunch of vehicles going out and you're kind of amongst a ton of people, or if it's really like you're driving into pure wilderness. I think it's a little different when you go into like the rainforest or something like that, where just the density of the trees obviously makes it so that it's impossible to get that many people in there. But
yeah.
What's kind of the vibe in those countries? Is it, do you feel like you're out there in the middle of the wild, or do you feel like it's a little more commercial?
So it depends. It depends on where do you go and when do you go and with whom do you go.
Right.
In peak season, when people want to see the migration of the wildebeest crossing the Mara River with all the crocodiles getting them, that's usually a bunch of cars all around, and relatively, it's very touristic, I would say. What we usually try is to take people to feel the wild part of Africa. So we go away from the crowds. We try to go to more remote places where it's just us. So whatever we may be missing some things that other people see, because sometimes what companies do is that they travel next to the gates, next to the lodges, and when they see other cars like bunched up, they know that there's like a special thing, and they all drive there and they join the crowd. And we try to avoid that. So we try to like travel to the more remote places and have a more private and wild experience with animals. That's how the cheetahs jumped on our cars, because we were the only ones there. And again, we get to see really special moments. So, but in general, like, there are areas that we you drive on roads, I mean dirt roads, and there are areas that you're allowed to go off-road, and then you're completely like, you're just by yourself with the animals.
Yeah, I draw a parallel to, have you ever been to Yellowstone?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Yellowstone, you get a lot of people who are like, you can't go in June and July. It's just an absolute shit show when you get there, and there's cars everywhere, which is definitely true when you're going on the roads. But I mean, if you want to actually go out by yourself, it's not very hard to get out of your car and walk a little bit. And before you know it, when there's 1 million acres of preserved land, it's pretty easy to get out there by yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
and when did that flip switch, when you were kind of, okay, I went there, I wish I learned more about photography. You go back to New York, you become kind of a professional at what you're doing, going back and forth. At what time where you're like, okay, I want to start bringing people and helping to share this experience with other people through a safari guide? Because my guess would be that's somewhat of an intimidating undertaking when you're talking about planning something halfway across the world.
Yeah. So what we when we started my company, which is what it's called YS Wildlife Photography, we were just interested in showing the beauty of Africa and showing my work, and that was the main goal at that time. But then later on, when we started forming relationship with different kind of nonprofit organizations, conservation organizations in Africa, we donated some of my photography to them to raise money.
Oh, cool.
And the more we got involved with these organizations, the more we felt that it's like urgent for that this is like a real urgent matter, that elephants are really killed like every 15 minutes there's an elephant. Now it's a little less, but that elephants are killed like every few minutes, and soon enough in 10 15 years there won't be any elephants. So we at that moment we decided that we really want people to see this before it disappears, and we thought that when people will visit the place, they'll be the best ambassadors to spread the word and try to preserve the place.
Yeah, because there's always I talk about this on almost every podcast, so for my consistent listeners, I'm sorry for the repetitiveness, but there's always this weird balance you have where you want people to care about conservation and helping animals, and that's why so much of the things you see on Instagram or Facebook are all, look at this whale that died with all the plastic in it, or look at how often these elephants are being poached. And it obviously moves you, and it's something that animal lovers like ourselves are super sympathetic towards. But if you are somebody who hasn't experienced wildlife or just didn't grow up with that natural kind of magnetic attraction to wildlife, a lot of it is bringing people and getting them to experience it or learn more about it or understand the beauty of wildlife so that they care in the first place. And then they'll want to protect it. And then those Instagram videos or photos will be a little bit more impactful. So absolutely. I think sometimes we don't focus enough as wildlife conservationists on the beauty and the intriguing aspect and the wonder of nature, and more just on the fact that a lot of what's going on is really depressing.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
So I saw one photo that you had that I'm really interested in learning more in, which up until recently, I didn't even know lions climbed in trees, let alone 11 of them in the same tree.
Right.
Or at least that's what I counted. It looked like an entire pride of lions in one tree. Can you talk a little bit about what was going on there?
That was a really special moment. I hope that it's going to happen again. I doubt it if I'll ever see this again, but it was, we finished the day that was like, I would say mediocre at best, because it was raining and there was nothing exciting happening that day. And that's part of what happens sometimes in safari. You have to have some patience and some luck. So we drove back to the lodge. It was getting dark, and when we were like pretty much like 5 minutes from the lodge, when we already, because it got dark, we already stowed all the cameras. Our driver, which was amazing, he all of a sudden said, "Prepare for Kodak moment." And we're like, what? What is he talking about? So I didn't even pull my camera because I thought he was like joking. And then he's like making a left turn, making a right turn. And all of a sudden, and again, it was hard to see because it was getting dark. All of a sudden, we're standing under a tree. And on one big branch of the tree, we saw 11 lions, a whole pride.
Oh my God.
Like lioness and some cubs. And they were all just sitting there chilling. And it was just us, just one car at that moment. And it was just like amazing to see how like this beautiful and peaceful moment. And it was just like, 2 minutes from our lodge. So it was unreal. So we shot as many pictures as we could when the light still allowed us, and the rest of the time we just enjoyed the moment. It was a little bit also a little bit depressing because the cubs were very, very skinny, and it seems like they were not doing so well. They were all very hungry. Sometimes I don't know if you know this about lions, but the order that they eat the food when they make a kill is usually the lioness is the one that makes the kill. The male lion is the first one to eat, then the lioness eat, and then the cubs are the last ones to eat. So usually
Really, I didn't know that.
yeah. So usually if they didn't kill a big enough animal, or if there are a lot of individuals in the pride, then the cubs don't get enough food for them. And at that time that we traveled, it was like off season, so the migration was away, so it was harder for the lions to find something to kill. So it was a little sad to see those skinny cubs. But the next day we saw them, and they all seemed pretty happy and full. So they probably made a kill that night.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
And that's not a behavior that's consistent across all lions in Africa, correct? Like it's a small subsegment of the population that climb trees?
Right. I mean, there are more and more areas. In the past, it used to be that just one certain area in Uganda is known for like its tree climbing lions. And then there was like an area in Tanzania that's famous for its tree climbing lions. And more lions learn to do that, and the cubs are taught to do it. One of the assumptions that the reason why they do it is because they are looking for a place that has a little more breeze when it's a little high. There are the tsetse flies in the certain areas. The tsetse flies are horrible. I don't know if you know, these guys are like the worst, and I'm like if you look at me, I'm a tsetse fly magnet. So they're like they're attracted to me. So if someone's traveling with me in the car, that's one of the reasons that they hire me as a guide, is that they know that the tsetse flies will bite me, and they're not going to touch you. Yeah. So the lions are trying to avoid the tsetse flies by being a little higher from the ground. So in areas that there are tsetse flies, that's where they see this behavior. That's one of the reasons why we assume that they do that. And after all, they are cats, and cats, they like to climb on things, and just like the cheetahs like to climb on the car, and leopards like to sleep on a tree, then lions in certain areas, they just enjoy the view, enjoy the breeze, and enjoy being away from those flies.
And so you mentioned that your background as a veterinarian really helps to inform some of the photography that you're taking and understanding when animals are going to do certain behaviors. Is that because you can really see the very similar traits in a domestic cat versus those lions that are hanging out in the tree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, cats, as I say, a cat is a cat is a cat. It doesn't really matter like their size. They all want to do the same things. They all, like, especially the young ones, they're playful, and they're, I mean, you see the social life between them, between the individuals, how they're like greeting each other and like headbutting each other, just like your domestic cat would do, and rubbing against each other, and the way that they stretch, and the way that, so certain behaviors are exactly like the house cat. And that's definitely something that's an easy one, because if you know how cats behave, then you can pretty much predict how lions or leopards or cheetahs will behave. That's the more complicated ones are the ones that I'm not used to, that I don't see on a daily basis, like giraffes or elephants. But again, with time, you do learn their behavior as well, and you know how they like to react and act with each other. And most of the things that I'm anticipating are things that are between individuals, not just when one does something. I can tell that, this one is coming, and this one's going to come and greet it in a certain way, and this elephant's going to touch this one with the trunk. And so you can tell by the way that they're acting, you can tell like what's going to happen.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And in terms of cats, we've talked cheetahs, we've talked the lions in the tree. Are there any other specific moments that, would you say those are two of the top three, or is there any other moment that jumps out as one of the most exciting ones that you've had?
Oh, you mean exciting moments that I had, or
with cats? Like, is there any other like monumental experience that comes to mind?
Yeah, I had many. I mean, most of my great experience were with the big cats. I can think of like quite a few right now. For example, one example that shows how much patience is needed when you do wildlife photography is when we heard about a leopard with her cub hiding somewhere in the bushes in a certain area, like up in the mountains in an area that there are no roads. When we got there, we saw like about 10 cars circling like big area of like bushes, and everyone was saying that the leopard is somewhere inside with the cub, and people were waiting and waiting and waiting. But then most people, they either don't have the time or they don't have the patience, so they just want to go. We don't see anything, let's go. And we decided to stay, and we stayed, and still nothing happened. And I must admit that as even though I'm a wildlife photographer and patience is like the most important thing, in this case, I kind of lost hope that I'm going to see something. So, and it was getting to lunchtime, and sometimes when I'm hungry, that's my top priority. So I was ready to head back to camp and enjoy lunch. But then my girlfriend at the time, she was like, let's wait. Let's see what's happening. And I was like, are you sure? Maybe we should go and grab a bite and come back. And she said, like, let's wait. What was nice was the driver talked to the camp, and they were willing to drive lunch to us.
Wow.
An hour from camp in the middle of nowhere. They drove lunch. We waited there, and as well as a reward for what we just did, like when the lunch ended, the leopard came out, and then the baby came out, and he gave us a private show. We were the only car that was there. They were like playing with each other, and the mother was nursing it, and then the mother left the cub, and the cub was playing on a little tree. So we got to see the whole thing just for ourselves after waiting like a whole day for something like that to happen. So it was like an hour. That was like an amazing hour to see the interaction between the mother and this tiny little cub. That again, most people just gave up and left, and we were the only ones that stayed and were rewarded with this.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, and whenever there are like young cubs, I'm always like, if it's cheetah cubs or lion cubs or leopard cubs, I always try to stick around because there's always something fascinating and funny that's going to happen. Another incident that I can think of was this past trip that I was in the Serengeti in Tanzania. It was a couple months ago. We drove to a relatively remote area in the Serengeti, and then from far away, I spotted what seemed to be a lion on a big rock. So we drove closer to it, and as we got closer, we actually saw that it was more than a lion. It was a pride of lions. It was one male and like a few females and many, many young cubs. They were all sleeping, and it seems like it was like pretty much the middle of the day, and didn't seem like anything's going to happen. But we decided to wait with them because it is a special sighting to see all of these guys on the rock.
Yeah.
And within an hour or so, some of the cubs started waking up. They wanted to eat. So they were nursing, and the mother wanted to sleep. And they started waking up the mother. And then you started seeing the interaction between all of them, how they're trying to get attention. And the mother is trying to, she was like kind of growling at them to let her sleep. and then after they got their energy of eating, they started like playing. They wanted to play, so there was nothing to play with because the parents are sleeping. So they had their mother's tail to play with. And again, this is a typical cat behavior. You know, when they see like a yarn or they see like a little rope, they would start chasing it and playing with it. So the mother was flicking her tail because of the flies, and they kept chasing her tail and biting it, and that irritated her even more, and she was like growling at them, and they're like, so it was like a whole interaction and I don't remember when was the last time that I was laughing so hard like when I was watching like the cubs just chase the tail. She's flicking her tail up and down, and they're jumping up and down, and it was really fun and funny to watch.
Yeah, I think it's those moments when you can humanize animals in that same way. Like I'm sure every mother is used to wanting to sleep some more while their baby's just harassing them to wake up and play with it.
Yeah.
That you really start empathizing a little bit more with the struggle that certain animals go through and why it's so important to protect them. I mean, These are all animals that have families, live lives, have fun, play with each other. You know what I mean? And it's a beautiful thing when you can experience that firsthand outside of like, you talk about the patience it takes to wait for a lion cub for an hour and a half. Most
Right.
people go to the zoo and they see a depressed lion that's not doing anything for 5 minutes, so they leave and they're like, "Oh, these lions just sit around and do nothing. Like, what's the point?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's different. I mean, when you see that, it's heartwarming and really you understand why it's important to protect them.
Yep, absolutely. By the way, one of the things that I forgot to say about the leopard that was hiding in the bushes, one of the things that we did get to see, which was kind of we were watching them, and all of a sudden we saw two young boys, local Maasai kids. They were just walking with their herd of, I think it was like goats. They were just walking right there where the leopard was.
What?
And yeah, it's an area, it's a conservation area that has the local community and the animals, they all live together. But
wow.
But we heard at first some whistling, and then we couldn't figure out what's going on, and then all of a sudden we see those two kids walking straight to where the leopard was. So we drove towards them, and we actually warned them that the leopard is there, and then they changed their course and went away. But again, these are the kind of things that you see. Like, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen next. So you always have to be prepared. Things can happen all the time.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a good thing for the kids to walk into if they didn't know that.
No, that can ruin their day.
What do you think outside of, I mean, leopards, lions, the big boys, elephants? Is there any animal that's piqued your interest through your travels that's a little less expected?
I do like the little guys too. So, for example, I just posted on Facebook not long ago, but there's like this tiny little antelope. It's called don't laugh. It's called the dik. And it's pretty much the size of a chihuahua, maybe a little bigger than a chihuahua. And
wait, really, an antelope that's like a pocketbook dog?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That big?
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. So they're like about 6 to 10 pounds, and they're in a lot of places in Africa. You can see them. You just have to look for them. They're usually under the trees, and most of the time they live in pairs. And the urban legend actually says that they mate for life, and they say that when one of them dies, the other one dies from a heartache.
Wow.
So I don't know how much that is true, but it is. You can see them together, and it's, the more I watched them, the more I was intrigued by their behavior. So I did read a little bit about them and how they have special ways of marking their territory and how much they can survive without water, because they can utilize the little water in the leaves, and they can control the concentration of the urine. And so there are a lot of little creatures that a lot of people ignore, that when you really pay attention to them, they're quite fascinating. And it's amazing to see how each animal has its place in the savannah, and they all have they found their little niche that they can survive. Or another animal that's pretty fascinating, that's an endangered animal that lives in northern Kenya in a pretty dry area. It's called Giraffe. So Giraffe, basically, it's an antelope. It looks like a gazelle, but has a very long neck. So
don't they have huge ears too?
Yeah, they have big ears, and they have very long neck. So they're called like giraffe-necked antelope. And they're so they specialize, because the other animals eat the grass and eat the leaves on the trees. Because they have long neck, they specialize in eating the leaves on top of the trees, because they can reach a little higher. So they stand on their hind legs, and they can reach with their long neck, and they can eat some of the tallest, freshest leaves. And again, it's just like one of the things that this species adapted to. And it's quite fascinating, I think.
Where did the diks sleep? I would imagine like that's a pretty vulnerable little guy to be like living like a normal antelope would.
Yeah, they usually hide under the bushes. And I've seen some killed by cheetahs. I've seen some killed because they're so tiny. I've seen just in my recent trip to Kenya, we've seen a big prey bird that's called a martial eagle actually eating one. He caught like a relatively big dik and ate it. So because they're relatively tiny, they do have quite a few predators, and they do hide usually under the bushes and in a little more bushy area that gives them the protection.
What does a martial eagle look like? Is it like a bald eagle?
It's not like a bald eagle, but it's like some sort of it's really, really big eagle, like that's brown and a little bit of white, and they can eat like really big prey, and they're quite impressive. I do have some photos of them on my Instagram, I think. I think even one of them that is eating the dik. It's quite a monster. I've seen it once. Even I didn't get the picture, but once of them lifting a dik in the air and like taking it to a certain place to eat it later on. So it's a monster.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you focus any time and attention outside of Africa, or is it one of those things where when you can take photos, you go to Africa, or do you bounce around a little bit?
So I do. I mean, Africa is my go-to place because that's where you see the most wildlife, and this is the animals that I get more attached to and I feel more connected to. But when I'm in New York, I try to photograph whatever is around here, and when I'm in Israel, I try to photograph whatever's the highlight that time of the year there. Just recently, I went to. That's actually a sad story on my end. I'm even embarrassed to say it. We went to San Juan Island in Washington State, where they have beautiful foxes there. And at this time of the year, it's the fox kit season, so you see a lot of baby foxes, and you get to see them very close to you, and they're like in beautiful flowery surroundings, and we got some amazing shots. And everything was nice and beautiful. And then when we folded the camera and called it a day, I turned around and was heading towards the car. And then I saw it happening, but everything was already packed. So you see a baby fox grabbing a rabbit, and he's running with the rabbit. And then all of a sudden, this bald eagle comes and snatches the fox with the rabbit and takes it in the air. For like a few seconds, and then it took the rabbit from the fox and then dropped the fox and flew away. And two of my friends there, one got a video of it, one got a few shots, because they were just photographing the sunset, and so they were just viewing that area, and it just happened next to them, and they got to see it. That just shows you how much you.
What a selfish freaking eagle!
Yeah. So
how high did he drop the fox from? Did the fox survive?
It was about 20 feet. I ran, again, the vet in me. The second he dropped the fox kit, I ran to see where the fox kit was, but we couldn't find it. So he probably ran away and hid in one of the dens. I hope he's okay.
Well, that's good. At least it made it.
Yeah, but it just shows you that you need not just like patience, you need also a lot of luck when you're doing wildlife photography.
Yeah, that must be one of those things where you're like, I've been outside filming these things all day long, and now this happens.
Yeah, it's still killing me, but it's part of it. But I did get some special moments, not just then, but other places. But back to your question. So in New York, there's not much happening other than birds. So that got me a little more into bird photography, different kinds of owls. Like this past winter, I was like all into snowy owls. They're like beautiful owls, the white ones, and
like Hedwig from Harry Potter.
Exactly. I'm not a Harry Potter fan, but yeah, that's the one.
Have you read Harry Potter?
No, I haven't. That's what I'm saying.
That's why you're not a fan. I was going to say there's nobody who's read Harry Potter that's not a fan, because it's the greatest books of all time, and I recommend it for any age.
Okay, so I went
I almost get annoyed when people don't read Harry Potter. It's been such a powerfully positive part of my life that I just want everybody to experience.
All right, I'm gonna read it now. I'll order it on Amazon.
That's all. I'll stop there.
Yeah. So like this past winter, every Sunday I used to go to the beach to look for those owls, and it was, there was nothing else to do. It was freezing cold. It was like minus 20. And here I am like at 4 a.m. waking up on my day off, going to shoot the snowy owls. My girlfriend wanted to kill me. But At times I was able to drag her to come with me. At times I went by myself. But that was, by the way, one of the special moments that I was talking about patience. I was talking about luck. But in wildlife photography, another key feature is also preparation. You have to, what the subject that you're photographing, you have to learn a little bit about it, about the behavior and places that he likes to be and things that he likes to do. You have to prepare with the weather to know what time is sunrise, what time is sunset, and things like that. And in that particular moment that I'm talking about, I went to the beach in the afternoon, and everyone were photographing a snowy owl that was next to the parking lot. And it was just sleeping there, and there was nothing exciting about it. And I was hoping to catch the snowy owl with the sunset, but it didn't look like it's going to happen. So I left that snowy owl where everyone else was, and I went to the beach and started searching the beach looking for a different snowy owl. And when I saw that I couldn't find any, I started running back to the one that we saw. So I'm not going to miss that before it gets dark. And all of a sudden, I spotted one right by the water, all alone, just for me. So the one thing that, speaking of preparation, I did know that that day there's supposed to be a full moon and it's supposed to be a super moon.
Wow.
So my hope was to catch the snowy owl with the moonrise as a background. And when I saw the snowy owl, I placed myself preparing to where the moon is going to rise and hoping that everything is going to work and align perfectly. And then people spotted me spotting the snowy owl, so they started joining me. But they were all looking the other direction because they were looking at the snowy owl with the sunset. And the moonrise was on the opposite side. So you see a bunch of 10 photographers shooting the snowy owl in one direction, and I'm the only one that's shooting it the opposite direction. And then later on, they were like, "Why were you shooting it this way?" I was like, "Look behind you. There's the full moon." And they're like, "Oh my God, we missed that." And so I was the only one that got this shot, while everyone got nice sunset shots that you can get at any time. And a moonrise shot with a snowy owl, that was not something that you get all the time.
No, I also think a moonrise kind of embodies what a snowy owl is a lot more than a sunrise. You think of warmth, and
right.
A moon you think of cold. So I think it makes a little more sense.
Right.
Are they hard to find? I would imagine that's are they pretty well populated around you?
So they come during the winter. They migrate to the East Coast, anywhere from. They go down to the Jersey Shore, sometimes even southern than that. And they're usually next to they like the beach area. And this winter we had what we call eruption of snowy owls, because there were quite a few of them that traveled all the way down here. They usually just stay for a month or two. This time they stayed, I think, from the end of November until beginning of April. And when you know where the general area that they are, they like to stand on top of some sand dunes. And so if you know what you're looking for, you can actually spot them. If they're there, you can spot them relatively easily. Another funny story about that is one of the first snowy owls that I went to photograph this winter. I got there before sunrise, and I saw a bunch of cars, so people were already there. And I'm walking towards the area that I knew that someone spotted the snowy owl the night before. And everyone's walking in front of me, and I'm one of the last ones to arrive to the beach. And everyone were walking right on that path that I did. And all of a sudden, I see something, and I was like, "Is that a snowy owl?" And again, everyone passed right by it, and they didn't see it. And I was, wait, let me check. Let me look in my camera and make sure that it's really a snowy owl. And there it was. It was I don't know, 10 yards away from me, where everyone were just walking, and they didn't notice it. And I managed to get quite an amazing shot of it taking off, with the yellow background of the sunrise. And again, it's something that, I could have easily missed. But if you keep your eyes open and you know what you're looking for, sometimes you get rewarded.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's always so much more special too when you're in your own elements and find it yourself. I mean, going back to Yellowstone, there's always a huge difference between getting in the car, driving around, and just seeing where all the cars are piled up on the side of the road versus kind of hiking around, and then you're like, "Oh shit, is that what I think it is?" And then you bring out your binoculars and you find it, and you're like, "Yes, it is." And I'm the only one who gets to see this. It's a selfish thing, but it's it makes you feel a little bit more a part of it.
That's absolutely true, and that's exactly why I like to stay away from the crowd. So the crowds usually, they see a sleepy lion, and there are like 30 cars around it, and I mean, there's nothing special to see because they're sleeping, and definitely I don't like seeing it with all the people. So when I go to remote areas, it's also a little bit more of a challenge for me to spot these animals, and I feel that even though I feel like my vision is deteriorating when I can't like read a book now because I need like reading glasses. But spotting things from far, I can still like spot cheetahs and leopards and like special things from really far away. So knock on wood, that vision is still working, and it makes it way more rewarding when you spot something by yourself and then you spend time with this animal by yourself. It's definitely, it makes the experience much more special than like joining a crowd that are watching a sleepy lion and surrounded by so many people.
Yeah, and it's almost like, you ever play video games?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm afraid to say no after the Harry Potter thing.
I know. Now I feel bad for that. I'm sorry. But like, I used to grow up playing all the Zelda games and Mario and all that stuff, and
Yeah.
it would always annoy me when my friends would get the guidebooks, and you could buy the guidebook for like $15, and it would basically exactly tell you how to do absolutely everything. And you're like, why?
Right.
I think of it the same way. It's like, if I know exactly when there's cars pulled over, I pull over and I'll see something. It takes the adventure out of it.
Yeah.
I want to jump back a bit to the Washington story, because we kind of jumped quickly. But do you head there often? That area is gorgeous, the San Juan Islands.
So that was actually my first time there. I've had friends that went to that area. Because I travel so much to Israel and to Africa, I don't get much to venture to other parts, even though I want to. That's one of the things.
That's like a very what's the right word? That's like a complaint. That's like one of those complaints that people give you like
you
a
say
look
it's
for.
It's
like,
trouble.
oh, it sucks that I spend so much time in Africa.
Trouble.
I don't get to go anywhere else.
Troubles of rich people.
Yeah.
So it's it's true, but I tell my clients when they come to Africa, just so you'll know, like, don't say I didn't warn you, that once you go to Africa, you get addicted and you'll want to come back again and again and again. And it's so true. Like, most of our clients, they recommend their friends and they want to come back again. And so that's kind of it. I mean, you're laughing at it, and I can see why, but it is addictive. And I was like, this past winter, I was like, okay, I want to go to Yellowstone in the winter. I want to photograph like special animals that are in the snow. But then I had like this opportunity to take a group to Tanzania during the migration and seeing the birthing of the wildebeest. And I was like, it's a tough one. But then I was like, all right, Africa wins. So
I get it. I'm not laughing at it. I understand it. I'm just saying you can't complain when you're not going to the other places. If you get to go there.
I'm not complaining. No, so that area I definitely want to come back. Again, Washington, like I was there just for the weekend, and I was like so upset that I had only the weekend and I couldn't explore it more. It's beautiful. It's like, what am I doing in New York City? And I really want to live. That's one of the places I want to live. I'm not kidding. Like Seattle was amazing, and the surrounding is like just gorgeous. And
Seattle's such a cool city, and it's amazing how quickly you can get out of there and be in like complete wilderness. I mean, even when you take you could take the ferry over to like the Port Townsend, San Juan Islands.
Yeah.
There's orca whales, there's humpbacks, there's seals as far as your eyes can see. It's amazing.
Right. It is amazing. I definitely want to come back again. And those foxes got me addicted to that too. So I'm going to come back.
And I heard it only gets better too. Like once you head up towards British Columbia and the Great Bear Rainforest. I haven't been up there, but the Seattle is about as north as I've gone yet. But I heard it just keeps getting wilder and better the more and more you go north.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the places I want to start exploring more, the extreme north and extreme south. I've been to Alaska once. I'm going to be in Alaska again this July. That's going to be more a family trip. And more like scouting for like before I bring groups. And it's a wild place that's just amazing. It's like Did
you see any bears while you were there?
Oh yeah, plenty of bears. I went all the way up north to see the polar bears, and I went to Denali, and in Denali I got like a cute shot of I was hiking, and there was like a grizzly bear, and I was actually following the grizzly bear, just walking behind it, keeping my distance, and not disturbing it. And at one point, the grizzly bear just like sat down, and then he was posing, and I got this shot that made it to a finals of a competition of like the comedy awards for wildlife. You see him like posing like a French model,
Really?
with his hands behind his head, and the legs are crossed, and it's like really funny shot. I think it's on my website. So I got to see them pretty close, and I'm planning to see a lot of them in this coming trip.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a top 3 for me. What were the polar bears like? How far north do you have to go? Was that in a?
Yeah, so polar bears you can see in quite a few places, but in Alaska, the place where you see them is a small village. It's called Kaktovik. It's all the way up north. You usually have to fly to that area, and it's a local village of the Inuit people, and they so during September the polar bears are coming to that village. And they're waiting there until the sea freezes, and then they start heading up north. Now, the locals, they're allowed to hunt 3 whales a year because that's their local tradition. So they have a special permit to hunt whales. And the first few days of September is when they usually do that. And then after they utilize all the meat, they leave the bones in what they call the bone pile. And that attracts the polar bears. So that's the place that you can see them a lot. And you go by boats and you keep your distance from them, and you see them quite close. And quite often the polar bears actually walk in the streets of the village. And when something like that does happen, they make a siren to warn everyone so people will stay home.
Jeez.
Yeah. So that's one of the places. Another place that I haven't been, but it's definitely high on my list, is in Churchill in Canada. That's where you see the polar bears in March. Pretty much at that time of the year, they're coming out of the dens with their little cubs.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, that's a cute yet expensive experience, but it's definitely on my list.
You got to wonder, like, what certain animals think when they, like, for example, the siren. Like, it must be a weird thought process that the polar bear is like, every time I walk right into this little area, this massive noise goes off. Yeah. He must think he's like a king or something, going in and creating like it's a welcoming symphony or something.
Yeah.
Were you filming them on foot, or do you usually get in a vehicle for that?
So you get in a vehicle, and you also mostly by boat. So you take these boats, and they take you to. They have like tiny little islands there off the coast of Alaska, and that's where the polar bears usually just chill until they can get. They start heading north and find.
And it's
food.
A good way to get close without any of the danger.
Yeah, it's completely safe. You see them. Sometimes you see them swim in the water. You don't get, and again, if you get there like at the end of September, I was there at the beginning of September, so it just started snowing, but if you get there towards late September, it's covered with snow. So you see the polar bears with the snow, and they're still there. The ice is not thick yet for them to travel up north. So it's a good time to see them there.
What are they eating? Is it seals mostly?
Yeah, usually seals. That's the number one thing that they go. But again,
they actually go underwater and get them, or is it usually when a seal's up on the ice sheet?
Yeah, sometimes they both ways, but usually on the ice, and that's why they need the ice to form in order to hunt. Otherwise, they usually don't. They can't do it. The seals are much faster than them in the water.
Seals are hysterical animals. They're like the little puppy dogs of the sea. I went to a national marine life center, basically a rehab facility on Cape Cod in Massachusetts for seals, probably about 3 weeks ago. And they just brought in a little baby harbor seal that was stranded from its mother. And they have a gray seal that was hit by a great white out by Chatham. And they bring them in, and it's crazy because you'll go up to the tank and how curious they are. And they literally just like want to play with you. It's so funny. It's just like having a dog around.
Yeah, I've done some snorkeling with seals in the Galapagos Islands. They're like, just like you said, they just want to play with you. They're just like swimming straight at you and then turning at the last second, and they want you to chase them. And yeah, that's.
Have you done any underwater photography when you were over there?
I haven't. I used to do, I'm a scuba diver, and I used to scuba dive a lot more in Israel, where the Red Sea is like one of the best places to scuba dive. I never got into the underwater. It's always like tickling at the tip of my fingers. Should I get into that? But again, as long as I am here in New York and I'm still addicted to Africa, then I don't see that happening. But I love scuba diving. It's a completely different world.
Yeah, and it's I always equate it to going to outer space. Like everybody's so obsessed with going to space, and it's like you can just go in your backyard, walk into the ocean, and it's a completely new world.
It's exactly like that. It's really like outer space. It's completely different thing.
How'd you like the Galapagos? That's been like top 2 bucket list of mine for my entire life.
Yeah. So when I was there, I wasn't doing photography at the time. So that was long time ago. And it was when people didn't travel there as much. So it was quite amazing. I heard that it's still amazing place, but it's more touristic nowadays. And I've heard that there are like fewer animals, but it was really special seeing those giant tortoises and the birds that you can just like pretty much touch. They're like that close to you and they're not afraid of you, and different sceneries and a lot of sharks. And I mean, it's pretty much everything that an animal lover will enjoy. So
did you see those hammerhead swarms of the hammerheads? Yeah, that's wild. I mean, it's literally like a blanket. You can't see anything but them as far as you can look.
And there's like a place that there's a bay, I forgot what it's called, that on one side of the bay, it's like very, very narrow strip of sand. On one side, you get to swim and snorkel with like little penguins. And on the other side, they don't allow you to get into the water, but you can get until like knee deep water. And you're like in the water, knee deep, and you're surrounded with like reef sharks. They're like swimming all around you.
So cool.
It's really cool. I mean, sharks are another thing that fascinates me. When I do scuba diving and I see a shark, I usually swim towards the shark and start following it. I've had some incidents that I almost died because of that, not because of the shark, but because I didn't notice how deep I went.
Oh, really?
I'm so I was like so focused on the shark that I just swam next to it and didn't see that it takes me like to very deep depths. Yeah.
What got you into scuba diving, and what's the Red Sea known for? Is it coral reefs over there?
It's mostly coral reefs. It's like one of the best places, Sinai Peninsula, that used to be Israel's, but now it's Egypt. I used to own a scuba gear, and I go like every other weekend or so. I would go for like the weekend of scuba dives. And it's just like it's a beautiful place, and it was untouched at that time, and the corals are amazing. Like the amount of, you don't see as many big fish there. I mean, you see big fish, but not as many sharks and manta rays, but you do see here and there. But the coral and the amount of and the variety of the fish is they say that it's one of the top 2 places, that and the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. So it's really special for you. If someone likes scuba diving, it's one of the best places.
Yeah, I always think that that's one of the most fascinating things about wildlife in general. It kind of gets back to the dik story, which is even as somebody who loves wildlife and obviously spends a lot of my time doing it, it always amazes me how many species I've just never heard of that are amazingly beautiful. I think like the average person probably has like a 3% understanding as to the wildlife that actually exists in the world. And then it's like I could bring you down to a coral reef and in 3 minutes show you more species than you ever even knew existed in the entire world. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And and watching these fish with like the bright colors and then the camouflage ones that look like rocks, and it's like endless. I mean, and it's amazing to see how much we don't know. Even people that like myself, that I consider myself an animal lover and a veterinarian, that I know a lot about animals, I do learn a lot every day. And when I do my posts, especially on Facebook, I try to a little bit educate people, and a lot of people appreciate that. I give a few tips about or a few like little pieces of information about different species that either people don't know the species or they don't know the certain facts about it. And that's my way of drawing people into loving these animals.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd provide the same feedback. I've loved going through your Facebook, particularly just because every picture has some tidbit of information or some bit of your personality and a little fun kind of joke associated with it, that it's so much different than just going around and seeing a picture. But one in particular that I found fascinating that I saw today was the recent picture you posted of a cheetah, and it was growling or yawning. I don't know what it was doing.
Yawning.
And you talked about interesting thing about its teeth and its mouth and its nasal passage. Do you remember that off the top of your head? Because it was, if you could go into that a little bit, it was fascinating info.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, unlike other cats, the cheetahs have adopted their skull and their teeth to the kind of prey that they eat, and to the kind of and to the way that they hunt the animals. So usually, if you look at lion's teeth and leopard's teeth, you're going to see that they're much bigger, and the canine teeth, the long, sharp ones, are much longer compared to the cheetah ones, because the cheetah goes to the animal's neck and it's just like squishing its trachea, its main airway. So you don't need big teeth for that. While the other ones are like ripping pieces of the animals and like tearing pieces of meat. The cheetah also needs a lot of air to breathe it needs a lot of oxygen when it's running. So if you have big teeth, the roots are growing into your nasal cavity, and it takes space from the cavity itself. So you have less room for air to get in. And the cheetah has smaller teeth, bigger nasal cavities, and they can utilize more oxygen when they're running and trying to chase the animals. It's like when you dig in and you dive into the different animals, and you see how like they specialize in certain ways, and each one is like, things that you don't even think about, like, who would think that there's like a difference between the teeth of the cheetah and the lion, and when you look in that, it's just shows how amazing nature is. It's
100%. I mean, I had never noticed how. I mean, I encourage listeners to go and look at a picture of a cheetah right now. The top teeth are tiny, which makes
really,
sense,
really
and they're the fastest animal in the world,
right?
And that would explain it, because they need the air to get there. But the second that it gets out of that nasal region, they have these huge fangs for tearing apart that meat. That I was like, wow, that's just really interesting.
Yeah, so I do try to not only that, sometimes I give some pieces of information, sometimes I try almost always to tell the story behind the shot, because then people they pretty much like join me in and they can imagine how I felt and what I saw when I took the picture, and that's the feedback that I get from people, that they really love that about my posts, is that they really feel that they're there.
How about the apes of Africa? I've seen you taking some pictures with gorillas and chimpanzees, I think mostly in Uganda.
Right.
Do you feel when you say you have a love for Africa, do you feel like that's the same type of thing? Because it's crazy how diverse of an ecosystem you find within Africa. It's a completely different place, essentially. Completely
different. One of the things that it makes it different is that most of the safaris that we do are by car. And even though you get to see the animals very close, again, sometimes they jump into your car and you're like face to face. But most of the time, the car separates between you and the animal. And when you do the gorilla trekking or the chimp trekking, you do it by foot, and the animals are right there. Nothing separates between you and the animal. So if the animal decides to do something, nothing will stop it. And it's much more thrilling to see these animals. Certain things I didn't anticipate that that it's gonna feel the way that it felt. For example, when we were walking with the chimpanzees, I knew that they can be a little crazy, but I didn't know how crazy these animals are. And they can see. I don't know if you've seen the movie Jane, about Jane.
I haven't. I've been dying to though.
It's a must. It's really interesting and quite fascinating. But in her movie, you can see like how crazy these animals can be and how violent they are. And unlike the gorillas that are, they eat mostly plants and they're more chill. The chimps, they can eat meat and they can be really crazy and very violent. So all of a sudden you're walking next to them and they're walking peacefully, and then all of a sudden something happens and you don't always know why, and they started being very loud, and they're like banging on the trees and like chasing each other, and they just something just turned some switch turned in their head, and you see the different
Right.
personalities that they show, just like people. And then all of a sudden they calm down, and you see all the human traits in them. They're thinking, or they're relaxing, or they're enjoying a massage that one gives to the other. So it makes everything more thrilling when you're right there. I had like a cute encounter with a gorilla when we were watching a mother gorilla and a few babies walking by, and then one of the babies started walking towards us, and he came straight to me, and I'm taking pictures, and then my camera can't take pictures anymore because he's too close, and then he's coming to me, and he's pulling on my pants, and he's looking in my eyes, and I look in his eyes, and it was like a moment that I will never forget. It was just like,
oh
we were just
my
like,
God.
so he's pulling my pants, and he's like, as if like a little kid that asking to be picked up or something, and I'm looking at him, and it was very special, very emotional moment, and it taught me what I always tell my guests is sometimes you just have to put the camera down and enjoy and just appreciate what you see. By the way, that's one of the things that special about our company is that I do the photography for my clients unless they want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So they can just enjoy and appreciate the beauty of this place. They don't have to worry about taking pictures. I take all the pictures for them. So
that's really cool.
At the end they get like a USB drive with all the pictures, the special pictures of what we saw, and if they want more they can get more, and they can just enjoy, take a little bit of iPhone pictures. They don't have to invest in cameras, and they can just enjoy it. And
that's amazing, because I think that's a huge it's an interesting thing that I've talked to a lot of folks about, where it's an odd like catch-22, where there's part of photography and there's part of videography where looking at the world in a way in which you can capture it and take photos and take videos is almost really enlightening, because it helps you appreciate things a little bit more, and it helps you like notice the details and framing, and just it gives you a better appreciation. But at the same time, it does also provide a layer through which you're not experiencing it to the fullest extent that you can. So in one way, it almost enhances the experience, but in another way, it almost takes away from it. So it's really hard to find a marriage between allocating your time to each.
Right. I mean, I do try, and many times I forget that, and I need like someone to remind me to just put the camera down. And so what if I'm going to miss a few shots? Like really, sometimes just like when I watch those lion cubs playing with their mother's tail, there were a few moments that I just put the camera down, and I just like laughed so hard just watching them, and just enjoyed myself. And it's really something that we sometimes forget.
I agree entirely.
We're there to enjoy and to appreciate this, and not to just like document it.
I want to jump back, because I had like 12 questions that we jumped past on the on the chimps part. First, with the baby gorilla tugging at your pants. One, it sounds like a beautiful experience that I wish I could have been a part of. But two, were you worried at all that the mom was going to get kind of pissed off and come on over?
I watched a few videos of people that were like touched by gorillas, and I really hope that something like that's going to happen to me. I always, just like I'm hoping for like cheetahs to jump on my car, I do hope that to have like this special connection with animals. So I wasn't afraid at all. I wasn't worried at all. It all was very, very peaceful. We did have some incidents that, someone just slipped and it scared the gorillas, and then all of a sudden the big silverback gorilla started charging at them. But most of the time the animals, they don't want to hurt us. They just want us to leave them at peace and not to disturb them. So many of the incidents that I had with animals that were charging at me or charging at the car, it was just like what we call a fake charge. They're just trying to tell you back up and give us our space, and that again, that puts us in perspective and reminds us, don't get too close to the animals. That's their home. They're wild. We don't want to hurt them, and we should act as guests in their homes and give them their space and and their respect. So back to the gorillas, it was not for even a second. I wasn't I wasn't scared, and it was just it was a magical moment. I can't.
Yeah,
describe it
well,
otherwise.
I think the territorial thing has a lot to do with it. I was actually just before this podcast watching an interview with, do you know Coyote Peterson?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking about how he was in a situation where he was close to getting charged by a grizzly bear. And when you're getting charged by a grizzly, you actually just want to curl into a ball and like support your neck,
Right.
because it'll come over there and just touch you and make sure that you're not a threat and then go away.
Right.
Although apparently it's completely different with black bears. Black bears will actually kind of take a bite out of you. So that you might want to act a little bit more tough in that situation. But this is just from the Coyote Peterson interview. I don't know if it's, I didn't get firsthand knowledge or anything, but apparently that's the tactic to take.
Actually, it happened to me. I was in Delaware. I was shooting. I was looking for black bears, and I saw and I parked my car in a place that I saw a mother cub with a mother and two cubs. So I kept my distance, and I was just following them by foot, but again with a safe distance.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, the mother just turned around. She felt that it was like a little too close again, even though I always give them the space and I don't get too close. She felt that it was too close, so she turned around, and she probably just did like 2 steps towards me, like 2 running steps towards me. That was enough to scare the hell out of me.
Yeah, jeez.
I just dropped my camera bag and I ran to the car. I didn't even look back. My guess is that she didn't even do more than 2 steps, but that was enough for me. And I came back half an hour later to pick up my stuff. But and even though they tell you,
I've heard like and that's kind of like would be my intuition. I think I had a very similar moment where I was in Lake Tahoe, and my buddy runs like a boat rental business out there. So we were driving boats around the lake, dropping them off to different people who are renting them. And then at the end of the day, we moored the boat, and it had to be like 7:00. The sun was setting, and we took a little dinghy into shore, and we come up, and this woman came up to me, and she only spoke Spanish, but she kept going, oso, oso. And I was like, and staring at me in the eyes, and I was like, I don't know what you're saying. And then she goes, oso, oso. My girlfriend was next to me, and she looks up, she goes, Dan, that means bear. And I turned to my right, and there's literally a mom and 2 cubs, had to be 15 feet from us. And I just grabbed my girlfriend, put her in front of me, and just sprinted. But I heard after the fact that I don't know whether or not that was a good tactic, because sometimes they can be induced to running too. So
right.
I've kind of heard both sides of basically everything. You're supposed to climb trees. You're not supposed to climb trees. You're supposed to run. You're not supposed to run. And I don't really know. I'm just going to try to avoid the situations.
Yeah, I mean, it goes by the situation, because sometimes if you're like, I was right next to the car, so it's you're not supposed to run, but it was just like the right thing to do, because it was right there.
Right.
I did have a close incident in Alaska with a black bear where we were camping. We did like kayaking, and we camped in one place, and then we're like camping in a very tall grass area, and all of a sudden I hear something, and we're like cooking our dinner, and all of a sudden I hear something. So I get up, and again the grass was like probably like 4 feet tall, and I get up, and then like, I don't know, 2 feet from me was a big black bear that was sniffing dinner. And I was like, black bear. So the guy that was with me and the girl that was with me, we all got up and we started making noise and like and then we scared him away.
Oh God.
Yeah, but that was like literally face to face with a black bear.
One swipe from that'll take you out.
Yeah. So again, it all depends on the situation. Sometimes like here you can't run and you can't do anything. So you just like try to scare him away and look big and hope for the best.
Yeah, because that's usually, especially from a grizzly standpoint, I think the vast majority of any times that they would be aggressive is just because they're spooked, or like you get close to their kids. Because most of the time it's like, oh, somebody rounded a corner and there was a bedding grizzly and they didn't know, or something like that. It's not like they're oftentimes just aggressive for the sake of being aggressive. It's usually like a fear response.
Right. And when you go in places like in Alaska, for example, you can see them hunt for salmon in the water. You can be in the water and they run right towards you when they're chasing the salmon, and they don't really care about people there. They're just like care about food.
Yeah, well, especially when they're satisfied. I think they get a little ornery when they're like need to get fed until they go hibernate, or they just come out of hibernation and they're hungry as hell. It's like when they're sitting there just munching on salmon, they're good. I actually talked to I forget who it was. I think it was either Michelle Valberg or John Marriott, who does a lot of photography up in the Great Bear Rainforest. And he or she was saying that there was one time they were doing spare bears up in the Great Bear Rainforest, and they saw one that was so happy and so well fed because there was so much salmon jumping up that it would only take out females, cut open the belly, eat the caviar, and throw it back in the water. To the point where one time he grabbed a male by mistake and like threw it out in disgust and was just like, I don't want this thing. But it's funny, like the specific. It's another thing. Like just the more and more you get into the specific behavior and learn about them, it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned that unless I misheard you, that the chimps felt different than you expected.
I for some reason I thought that the experience with the gorillas, it's going to be a little more thrilling.
I thought you meant like it physically felt like it, like a chimp hit you or something.
No. But they were like really running past us. They didn't really care about our presence, but they were like running past us, like, rubbing against us pretty much when they were like running and shouting and banging on the trees. So it felt a little more like unstable environment,
right?
Compared to the gorillas that are just sitting there and they're like eating leaves and much more calm. So it's the chimps were always like on the move. They were like running and screaming. And
chimps are amazing.
Yeah,
like their social structure and they actually say that if you look at Homo sapien evolution, that if you were to look at the chimp evolution, that they've actually just entered into the Stone Age, where prior to more recent years, there was no evidence of them consistently using tools and showing that they were learning how to use tools to the younger chimps. Whereas now it's like very commonplace that chimps are learning, they're growing, they're being taught how to use tools, which means like they're just on a very similar evolutionary path to us, which is pretty badass.
Yeah, that is special.
Have you ever heard of Chimp Island?
Yeah, and there are a couple of them. There's one in Tanzania. I don't know which one you're talking about.
I'm talking about the one that was
in Uganda.
It was the result of a hepatitis lab.
Oh,
have you heard this?
No.
So this isn't Chimp Island in like a natural cause. I watched, I think it was a Vice documentary or something.
Okay.
I think it was in Libya or the DRC.
Okay.
Because it was in a place with a lot of like political instability. And this was back in, I think, the 70s or 80s. And they were doing a lot of chimp testing on hepatitis vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, it just became like way too dangerous of an operation because of the civil war, the war that was going on in the area. And the people who were running the facility actually really cared about the chimps, even though they were running all these tests on them, and wouldn't leave the area until they were held at gunpoint by the rebel forces. I'm probably butchering the story, but you can watch the documentary. I'll link it in the show notes. But long story short, the government ended up just taking like 300 chimps and putting them all on this barricaded island because chimps can't swim, obviously.
Right.
To the point where like now if you go there, there's government funding that once a day, these people go out on a boat, they throw a bunch of food out to these chimps, and there's just this massive island of formerly infected chimpanzees that are living there. It's crazy.
Oh, wow. That's, and then like, as you said, like 5,000 years from now, you're going to see them invent the iPhone.
I know. Exactly. They'll start a little civilization over there.
Yeah.
So what's next up for you? What's the next? Is there any big phenomenon that you're looking to capture or place that you're looking to go?
Well, I'm the next trip that's coming up is Kenya in a few weeks, and hopefully we're gonna get to see the migration. So it's this group's first time in there. So that's gonna be an upcoming trip, and then after that I have Alaska in July. But the big things that that's on the list, and hopefully it's going to happen in the near future, is Antarctica. That's one. And as I said, those polar bear cubs in Churchill in Canada, hopefully a couple years from now, because it's something that you need to book way in advance.
How would you do the Antarctica? Through Argentina or through New Zealand?
Yeah, no. Argentina probably, and take a boat. And that's supposed to be like, the ultimate experience, because that's like as wild as it gets.
Yeah, one of my very, very close friends in LA actually just got back from a month in Antarctica. He was a microbiologist and was
Oh,
studying microbiomes that live at the most extreme areas of the
right.
world. And he lived at the US camp for a month, and he said it was probably the coolest thing he's ever done. Like just
Yeah.
seeing penguins every day. They hiked up and went snowboarding. There's just nobody out there.
Oh,
But some of the bases, like there's some pretty cool. Like the base had a bar, and like
oh.
the sleeping arrangements were pretty nice. It's almost like a little like small little shanty town over there.
No, that's definitely something that I'm dying to do. Yeah, it's very high on the list.
How about kind of where you see, or even if you see the intersection between your work and conservation? I know you alluded to it a little bit earlier in the conversation, but is that something that you like taking an active role in, or have particularly strong opinions on?
Yeah, I mean, what right now the thing that because I'm a full-time veterinarian, so I'm still not at the position that I can do a lot more than I want to. I wish I could be more involved, like actually physically being involved and maybe living in Africa and helping in that sense. But right now we're working with a few organizations. One of the organizations that we really try to help is called PAMS, PAMS.
Okay.
It's it's a super important organization that they work in Tanzania, and they do mostly anti-poaching, mostly anti-elephant poaching, but
Mm-hmm.
different kind of programs. I don't know if you've heard about it, but their CEO, I think it was like almost a year ago, he got killed in his name was Wayne Lauder, and he got killed in Tanzania. Got shot by people that pretty much poachers that resisted what he was doing. What he invented, kind of, you can say, is a different kind of approach. Most of the anti-poaching that's being done is being dealt by the by the rangers in the field. So when you look for the poachers, and usually when you find them, it's already after they killed the elephant, and you're chasing them and trying to, like, you hear gunshots, you're chasing, you're looking for who did that, and sometimes you catch them, many times you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Their approach was more like of offensive one, that that they used some intelligence, and they actually went and kind of, you can say, raided the areas where the cities where those poachers sit and organize, and they stopped them there at their bases instead of like stopping them after they killed the elephants. So they were like pretty aggressive in the way that they were like dealing with the poachers, and they're like dealing with them before they go into their operations. And they were very successful, and they were stopped the poaching in Tanzania in a very nice way, and the numbers were doing very good. And they're working with the different villagers, with the local people there, and a lot of other countries adopted this approach. And because he was doing so well, the poachers saw him as a big threat. So one day that he landed from a flight, I think he came from home, a car just stopped his car. People just got off the car and they just shot him.
Oh
and
God.
and he's like, he was a very famous figure. Like, some of the biggest conservationists, like Jane Goodall, wrote a number on him, and so we work with his organization right now. Their leader her name is Chrissy Clark, and we try to help them as much as we can. They're getting more attention. Sadly, after he died, I know that Leonardo DiCaprio was posting something about this, and I think Prince William said something about him. So it was an organization that not many people heard of, and after his death, people heard about them and their approach more. And now so we're trying to help them. We're doing some fundraising for them. We're doing for some other organization like the David Sheldrick Orphanage in Kenya. So we're trying through fundraisers and through our photography to help these organizations. But right now, that's what we do.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really sad story. And
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the one positive is the efforts of whoever actually shot him ended up kind of backfiring if they're getting a lot more attention than prior, but it's still brutal. Ugh.
Yeah, it's that's one of the risks that these people know that they're taking, and yet they're doing this for the animals and for future generations, and that's amazing.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Daphne
Yeah.
she just passed away too, Daphne Sheldrick, and she was an absolute titan of elephant conservation back there as well. She was of natural causes, but that was a tough loss for the conservation community too.
Absolutely, and then that's why we always try to work with them as well. We bring, like, in a few weeks we're going to be in Kenya. We take people to see firsthand. They're going to see what the work that Sheldrick, our organization, does, whether it's the little babies in Nairobi or in their reintegration units in the national parks before they release those elephants. So we're going to get to see this up close. And when people see that actually, shows them the amazing work that these keepers do, that they sleep with the babies, like they're 24/7 with the babies all the time, and the long and tedious way that they have until they're able to release the animals and back into the wild.
Yeah, the amazing thing with the orphans is obviously they've likely gone through some pretty traumatic experiences very young in life. And the one thing people always allude to or mention or highlight when they talk about elephants is their emotional intelligence and their capacity to have very similar emotions to a human, and their memory obviously is it's staggering. And you see those photos of the people who are sleeping with these elephants 24/7, and it's because they're depressed. They're very sad creatures who have gone through traumatic things, and it really takes so much to get them back in living a normal life. And that David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust has done that so many times and reacclimated these animals to living normal lives that it's unbelievable.
It's I actually have a really cute shot of a baby elephant that you can see him between his mother's legs. You just see the mother's front legs, and you see his head between the mother's legs. And the mother was an orphan herself, that she was treated and rehabilitated by the David Sheldrick people, and then she was released back into the wild. And when she gave birth to her baby's name is Weeva. When she gave birth to Weeva in the wild, she brought the baby to the Sheldrick people and show them. She brought the baby to the orphanage and showed them her baby.
My God, that's amazing.
The keepers said that they couldn't stop crying when they saw it. Like that's how successful, that's how successful and rewarding this thing is.
That's mind blowing.
That's just like you said. They feel like the keepers were part of their family, so they came like to show their family like the new addition.
My God.
Yeah, it was like when we saw the baby, it wasn't the first time that the keepers saw that baby, but they told us the story, and it was like really a very emotional moment when you see this, the mother, that she was, almost dead, and these people rescued her. She managed to be rehabilitated, integrated into the wild. She had her own baby, and then she shows the world like what a successful job these guys did.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm also going to link the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in the show notes for anybody that wants to donate or support them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go, I know we're getting close on time here, so I'm going to go for a few rapid fire questions that I usually ask at the end of my podcast.
Okay.
Which is, one, if there is a wildlife book that you could recommend to listeners that has had an impact on you, what would it be?
There's a whole series of books by Nick Brandt. He's a big wildlife photographer. He usually shot film and not digital, so every shot is like well planned. And if you look at the whole series of books, you see the development of from like showing just like the wild animals to his most recent book that shows where the animals lived and what's there now. It's pretty strong vision. Like you see a big picture of an elephant standing on a dumpster. That's where the elephant was shot in the past when he was like wild and before people took over their land. And nowadays it's like there's the villages and places like that. So Nick Brandt, his whole series of books is amazing.
Awesome. And how about wildlife documentary?
I first of all, as I just said, there's the movie that I saw of Jane. That's a must, I think, to any wildlife lover, and especially if you've been to places where you saw the chimps. It brings memories, and it shows the hard work that this woman did and the achievements that she made. I think that's one of the most amazing documentaries that I've watched. I don't know about reading a documentary, but watching, that's a must.
For sure. And last one, I'll give you a second to think about it, but if you could go onto the side of a very busy highway right outside of New York City and plop down a billboard that disseminates one message in 10 words or less, what would you choose?
Oh, wow. I have to think about that.
Or what's something that kind of like a motto you like to live by, or a reason that you kind of got into the work that you do?
I mean, to me, the most important thing is like keep in mind that we're in their home and act as guests. So respect them, don't disturb them, and so future generations will get to enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And lastly, I mean, I'm going to link to all the show, like all your website, social, but if there's anything that you wanted to talk to listeners about where they can find your work, how they can support your work, how they could potentially go on a safari with you, just wanted to leave the floor open there for the end here.
So you can find me on Instagram, you can find Facebook, and you can find on my website. It's YS Wildlife Photography. Any organization that we work with, the Sheldrake or PAMS or other organization like Humane Society, there's an organization that there's a children's orphanage in Nairobi that we work with that's called Watoto World, that we took these kids on safari. So all these places are linked in our social media, so you can find some information there. And as for safaris, I always tell people I'm always happy to help you plan your safari, even if you don't go with me. This is truly my joy to help people plan the trip of their dreams. So I'll more than happy to if people want to consult with me and talk to me before they book with different companies. Me and my business partner are always happy to answer any questions. So you don't have to feel obligated that you're going to go with me. You can ask me questions, and I'm always happy to answer.
Well, that's amazing. And thank you so much for taking the time. I'm really excited to stay in touch. Like I said, the work you do is really inspiring, and I've really enjoyed following and look forward to continue to do so.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here and for this great project that you're doing. Hopefully that's going to help spread the word. So as many people as possible will get to see and enjoy this beautiful world we're living in.
Yeah, that's the hope. And for everybody else listening, thank you so much. Until next time, be wild. Thank you so much for listening. I honestly cannot express how much I appreciate you taking the time. For all information regarding this episode's guest, social channels, books, how you can support, etc., please check out our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please subscribe to the podcast. We are everywhere that you can find podcasts. Subscribe to Escape the Zoo on YouTube, follow Escape the Zoo on Instagram, like Escape the Zoo on Facebook, and please share with your friends. It honestly goes so far and means so much to me. And lastly, if you'd like to be emailed with each new podcast and any other major Escape the Zoo updates, visit escapethezoo.tv and sign up for our email list. Thank you.